Hi there, welcome to The Real Rant. And this is a show where we take you behind the scenes of successful commercial real estate transactions, how to develop assets, and more importantly, how to cash flow and produce real returns. If you think about it, what we want to do is try and take you from a journey from acquisition to occupancy to disposition when we're talking about this. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. We've got Daren Laureano here, and he is the CEO and founder of Southern California Equity. But I think what we'll find is the origin story, how his strategy, how his firm came to be is a really cool story. And I think we can all learn a lot from that. And Daren, welcome.
Hey, Stu, good to be here.
Yeah, very good. So, what we want to kind of go through is what were some of the early influences, maybe where education fits and where the work career started, and ultimately what led you to found Southern California Equity, and maybe talk a little bit about the innovation and the investment strategy there too. So, let's start at the beginning. Early influences and, when the idea of being involved in buildings and building stuff kind of came to pass. Take us back.
Yeah, I was one of those weird guys. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. It wasn't a question to me. It wasn't a question mark. I knew I wanted to be an architect and do architecture. I had a little bit of skill for it. So in high school, we had a pretty good architecture class. It wasn't just industrial drawing. It was an actual architecture class, which was kind of interesting. I ended up doing that all whatever 3 years we were there. I taught it 1 year, won architecture competitions, designing things that we entered in locally, just in the city there. And then ended up going to the School of Architecture at USC and was on my way and ultimately through a career. I mean, everybody starts young. There's going to be young people that listen to this. Hopefully there'll be young people that listen to this. I think it'll
Yeah.
resonate with them. But ultimately it comes down to, getting on that path, staying on the path and building relationships. And I found that all the way through my development of Southern California Equity and how to be a good fund manager and understand what I now call the three pillars: risk, liability, and delay. And understanding those, I think it comes through building successful relationships.
Yeah. I know that your track record is probably a unique path than most, particularly GPs. And over the course of the show, that we want to talk about perspectives from being a general partner. But what you've done gave you a really unique perspective. And so take us to next level. Now you are at the architecture school at USC. And I know there were some lessons learned early on there. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, there's some funny times in there. I think again, this is probably resonate with anybody who's either been to or been through architecture school. It's pretty funny. On my way there, I ended up working at a firm in Long Beach where I bugged them so bad. I think there's a moral of this story. I bugged them so bad on the phone and pestered them so much. They basically invented for me before I even went to architecture school, watering plants and building models in their model shop and running blueprints. This is back in the day when blueprints actually existed and nobody had computer models. Anyways, I end up at USC. The day one at USC is interesting, and some of my classmates may, see this and kind of laugh and chuckle at it. But we come rolling into the first day of architecture class, architecture studio is what they call it, and we think we're getting a syllabus like all of our other classes, and we're getting out of there. Yeah, no such thing happened. So we roll in the door. Professor LaGreco, remember it to this day, comes walking up to the microphone. There's about 140 of us, pretty small class for, freshman architecture class. And LaGreco lays down, your summer has ended. You will work and you will work hard. If you're here to make a lot of money, you're in the wrong place. And kid you not, Stu, 20 guys got up and filed out through the rows out the back door, and we never saw them again. We were down to 125 people, guys and girls at that point. That was the last we saw those guys.
Yeah, I know, when you've talked about this, it's that war of attrition. So day one, we definitely whittled down a few of the week. And I know you probably finished with a lot less than that, but why don't you take us through like when studio kicked in and what the real world looked like when you had, deadlines through a 5-year career there?
Yeah, you learn right away. This is, I was never really, I was never the smartest there, but I was one of the hardest working. And I think I found that to be also probably a principle of success, certainly in becoming a general partner, fund manager. These are very important lessons you learn early. In architecture, when he says, "Hey, we're going to pull an all nighter," it's not 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. It's, 10 a.m. the next day, and you're rolling in the same clothes back to your apartment for a shower, and you have to go back to studio again for another night over it. Sleeping bag, espresso machines are, pretty standard, there, because you're just kind of trying to catch a few winks and then, get right back to whatever it is that you were doing. That's pretty typical School of Architecture stuff there. I mean, it was back in the day when I
Yeah.
was there. They're still there. I haven't done it in a long time, but probably 10 years ago, I think I rolled by the studio in the middle of the night just to see who was there and kind of, chit chat and see what the kids were doing. And they were there.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that a work ethic has never been a challenge for you, and it starts early. And, it's one of the things that I think differentiates you now. If there's a challenge you're looking at, there's a solution and you're going to just keep grinding until you find it. So those lessons are learned early on. So, I know there's a lot of interesting things we could get into there, but why don't we transition to you made it out. Now you're looking at some of your first careers, and I know you have been enlightened to architects and how they fit today. But why don't you take us back then to when you kind of started really getting into what this is going to take?
Yeah, I think a lot of techs sort of undervalue about themselves is their problem solving ability and what it takes to break down a problem into parts and then, solve each one along the way. I don't think they give themselves enough credit for that, to be perfectly honest with you. And don't apply it to enough industries. And effectively, that skill set's, adaptable to many, many industries. Certainly in the acquisition of real estate, that process of breaking down the problem and ultimately finding out where the issues are. And again, I'm going to tell you it's liability, risk, and delay is where it is in commercial real estate. And that it has to do with small assets and large assets. And the funny thing is, I've developed sort of an idea that, which I think is really misunderstood. And that is small assets are not automatically easy and big assets are not automatically complicated, right? It,
That's
it
good.
has to do with a number of components in there, and a small asset can be a jewel box of problems that is ready to just eat you alive. And I'm
Mm,
sure there's some people that are veterans of this and some general partners and some fund managers who are going to watch this and laugh at that and go, isn't that the truth? The limited partners I know who are going to watch this are going to say, yeah, because everybody calls me up and it's a delay here and it's a delay there and it's a delay this and it's a delay that. And you're like, the thing's like 2,000 feet. What are you talking about?
right.
But it's just, again, it's not automatically simple as if it's small, and it's not automatically difficult if it happens to be, a campus of 100 and 500,000 feet.
Right. That's good. So those are lessons you learned early on. You had a couple, you were with a big corporate firm, then you're with a smaller, really specialty design situation. And I know there were some lessons that you learned early on there that it isn't always
Yeah.
the architecture that gets things done. It's building a business and getting buildings built are a whole other thing.
Yeah, and I think getting the buildings built clearly is a whole other thing, right? And ultimately, there's this, defining moment in all of architecture that is, and all of investment that is the certificate of occupancy that nobody ever talks about, right? They never even say it never even comes up in conversation. You don't talk to fund managers or limited partners or, family offices or investors or institutional lenders. Nobody talks about the certificate of occupancy. I guess it's just not sexy. I don't know. It's fine. But to me, it's the holy grail of cash flow in commercial real estate because you ain't getting any cash flow unless you solve that mystery and do it effectively and efficiently. So I began my original firm, and I'll come back to my architecture days. My original firm, ultimately, that's why we founded it. We founded it to focus on occupancy because occupancy is cash flow is high return on investment, and ultimately, that's very high IRR when you're looking at the time value of money. And the earlier you get it, the faster you solve that problem, the earlier you start to generate cash flow. The investment pays off over a 5 year, 6 year period, 7 year period. If it's
Yeah.
the holy grail of it's a 10-year lease.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, that's a lesson that you learned early, and I know it really separates your investment strategy today. We'll probably get into that. We'll definitely get into more of those things over the course of the series. But when you talk to me about occupancy, no there are very, very few GPs that start a project and start an acquisition really looking at getting a tenant in the building, which is where everyone makes money.
Correct. And I think that's right. Everybody involved in the entire investment, from consultants all the way up to the limited partners and any of the investors that you have in the project. Um, I'll give you a good story where I came out of that architecture school and ultimately found a way into a firm, photo design, for Brett Taney, who's a terrific architect, wonderful guy. Still know him today. We're actually doing work together right now. Um, he puts me in charge of a project, and it's for a very big Hollywood producer. I'm not going to say his name, but it's a really exciting project for me. His Brett's firm focused a lot on entertainment recording studios and production facilities. He's a specialist and an acoustician. I thought that would be a neat thing to learn. I had a skill for it. And we get in there. Anyways, I have a new ground up building going for this composer. Brett's the principal. I'm working on it. And I get a phone call out of the city to this day, which I've now called the "oh, by the way" phone call, but it begins the very same way every time, you can imagine. They called me up. I'm about 2 weeks from permits. I've been working on this thing for about a year. And they say, "oh, by the way, we were looking at calculation of whatever, and we realized that it, doesn't meet the code." And I'm like, "what are you talking about? There's no code for that." And she throws down the planner, that is, called me. It says she throws down well, it's the spirit of the code. And I'm like, "oh, really? That's interesting." I'll shorten the story. Fast forward, we end up in a conference down at the city. We have my client, the composer, or his representative, their attorney, our attorney, my boss, Brett, the principal, the city attorney, the director of planning, myself, and the city planner who called me. And they didn't do this quite. And certainly, my boss was great. My client was great. They were really wonderful. They never blamed me for this. But basically it felt like everybody pointed in the room and said, "it's his fault right there. He did it." That's how it came across to me. That's not what everybody said. But when I got up out of that chair and I started walking out the door, I said, "well, now you're going to see the most spiritual guy you've ever seen in your entire life." And that is when I walked out the door. And that was the last time I walked into a room and didn't know more than everybody in the building.
Yeah, very good. There are lots of, aha moments people go through. I know that was one for you. There's another one I'm sure we'll talk about too. But what that leads me to think about is being cycle tested. You've seen this, and that was kind of the early times of the dot-com days and what I know that was just before that, right? We're into, learning about production and media, and
Mhm.
then technology and all these things start coming in. What that leads to is the origin of Silicon Beach, really, right?
Yes.
In west side of Los Angeles. And I know you probably won't brag on yourself that much, but there are certain corridors that were developed over that, converting industrial into flex, office and production type of facilities. You were on the cutting edge of that, and you got most of those corridors built today. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Hundreds and hundreds of different developments, along the way to fund manager. It came with the acquisition of the asset is obviously critical. Everybody knows that. And being able to do it over a very long career and, accurately and predictably, nailing down what I call the big four questions, which is, what can I build? How much of it can I build? Where can I build it? And how long before somebody lets me build it? And you have to know the answers to those questions as a good general partner, as a good fund manager before acquisition. It doesn't count solving those things 6 months or a year after you acquired the building. And now I know what I can do. So we developed the acquisition targeting system that breaks down those four questions. I can overcomplicate it for you if you want, but I think it's better to keep it simple. Um,
Yeah, we'll take
and we've
deeper
done it
dives down
on,
the road.
yeah, and we've done it on hundreds and hundreds of deals. And ultimately, where after leaving the room of people blaming me, right? Ultimately, what I came to do was, when I founded my first company, was our deals came to us probably in two ways. They came to us as acquisition targeting. "Hey, I need to put this particular use, or I have this particular, idea." And we'd say, "okay, we're going to do, entertainment production facility, blah, blah, blah." We're going to go find an asset. We'll target it, right? So we would isolate out the advantages and the problems with any particular place, and then pick one of the assets, acquire, go through the transactional acquisition and all the negotiation, which we would jump into. break that down, find the opportunities in there, which are great. And then the other way the deals came to us was it was already a disaster, and somebody would call me up and find out about me and say, "Hey, I understand you're able to," I think, Stu, you call it now, what, the deal doctor, where you're able to come in there and I have the patient laying on the table and it's dying. And they're saying, "Hey, doctor, can you bring the patient back to life?" So we would go diagnose the problems, analyze, interview everybody in the process, ultimately, correct the issues, move it in the right direction, and ultimately get them to some sort of occupancy. So that's really the path that
Yeah.
led to Southern California Equity, the acquisition targeting system, our models now, and what we do. I actually didn't know that was a very unique thing at the time. I was just doing what I thought was the best value. It really came clear to me through some other circumstances, which we can get into in a minute, of why that had an incredible amount of value and why I had created something that really didn't exist.
Yep. And that's something that I know, you learn along the way. And, the next aha moment is as these calls just continue to pour in over the years through various market cycles, right? Through surges and downturns, that phone call just kept coming in. And, it's sometimes it takes us, I know when we talk a little bit, you go, gosh, man, I wish I would have figured that out earlier. But,
Yeah.
tell us about that kind of next aha moment. So Southern California land use is charging forward, the phone's ringing, and a lot of these deals you're involved in, you're the hub, right?
Yeah.
And now we start thinking a little bit differently about big picture and how can we do this better? And I think that's kind of the origin of Southern California Equity too. When did that kind of light bulb go off that, hey, this is something that with my track record, I might be able to tighten this up and make it better for everybody, all the stakeholders.
Yeah, that is a really good question. So the market cycles and having gone through those, what I actually realized was it's really amazing, actually, looking back on it after a couple of cycles, including the one we just came through. My phone rang louder when the cycle was tougher. When somebody needed leverage, I was the leverage. When somebody needed to find opportunity and advantage, we could diagnose it anywhere, in any acquisition, anytime. So actually, as the market sort of tightened, our popularity exploded. So ultimately you realize that, wait a minute, I'm solving all these things. And then here's where I can tell you the light bulb moment really came through that. Really fascinating, actually, because what ended up happening was I would start getting phone calls that started like this. "Hey, Darren, you don't know me, but," so I got the, "Oh, by the way," phone call, and now I got the "you don't know me" phone call, right? But the "you don't know me" phone call was really enlightening for, putting together a fund and an equity, fund for investment in commercial real estate, picking strategies, adapting, the acquisition of that, and ultimately the disposition of those assets within any fund. And it was the banks on the other end of the line saying, "You don't know me, but I've seen many
Mhm.
of your deals come across my desk. And I don't quite understand that. Can you break this? Can you explain this deal to me so that I can, finance it or do whatever?" And I'm like, and I would do that. It was very simple. I was like, "Hey, I'm here to add value. I'm here to build relationships with my partners. I'm relationship driven," and I'd break it down chapter and verse for them and I'd say, "Hey, we're going to do this. We're going to make this." And I think that's what most people don't understand. Certainly in commercial real estate, down the line from the fund manager, some developers do see it. Developers do see it. But ultimately, banks are very sophisticated for risk, far more sophisticated than everybody else. And they speak in a very, clear way if you're listening carefully and if you understand the language that they're trying to get at. And you're also trying to, soothe the areas of concern that a particular lender may have. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to in commercial real estate. Mostly, cash acquisitions is a thing, but ultimately leverage, financial leverage is where it ultimately comes down to it. And eventually you're going to have to get to a bank and you're going to have to break down that investment and the strategy and how you're going to produce the cash flow in order to pay them back. That's just the way finance ultimately works to produce, high return on investment for your limited partners and your investors. But they would start off and I'd say, so I'd break that down. And I said, gee, finally it occurred to me after enough of those phone calls. And I would say, well, wait, I didn't submit the loan application myself. They were attaching my underwriting into the loan application, which is how they knew my name and knew my brand. And I always said, oh, weird. Why didn't they call the fund manager and ask them to break down, the strategy of the investment? And it turned out they did. Okay. And the problem was they didn't get answers that actually made any sense. So that finally occurred to me. Ultimately, this is the aha you're asking. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Now I have the I'm doing position targeting. I'm doing the strategy and the investment strategy. I'm negotiating effectively with the legal teams for both acquisition and leasing for long-term high credit tenants. And the banks are now calling me to explain the financing. I'm fine. Southern California equity was long overdue. And that's the origin story. That's really the last probably aha moment that we got to.
Right. You've had a successful consultancy for really decades. And, you look at this, you're involved in every aspect of the deal. I would, I'm going to be so bold as to say that based on those calls, that there's probably nobody that knew the most critical factors of the deal better than you. Right. Does that sound about right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So why not go to the next level and really do it right? I know that's kind of one of the heart and souls of Southern California equity is let's do this right. Let's see what it looks like when we start this thing right. We don't need a doctor where there's nobody dying on the table, right? Let's do it right from the beginning. Take this competitive advantage that we've learned over decades and really kind of explore what that looks like for limited partners, what it looks like for every stakeholder in the deal. How do we make everybody's life better?
Yeah. And I think, by doing oversight the way which was totally unique at the investor level oversight over everybody in the deal, I ultimately had to be Switzerland. I knew that right away, right? Where I had to be totally confidential in every single thing I did. I was working in, at times I was working in maybe 20 different funds and investment strategies at a time, competing funds. And we really had to be very mindful of, providing oversight independently without conflict. I think that was a really big important factor there. But the exciting part was I got to see a lot of funds, how they operate. I got to see a lot of general partners and how they operate. I got to see what works, what doesn't work. I got to see what's successful. And I saw a lot of interesting things in both personality and organizational level that I could take and make even better and produce that into. And that's really what got the systems and the day-to-day operations at Southern California Equity set up was, we really understood what made a successful operation and what made a successful day-to-day investment fund work.
Very good. As I'm listening to that, that might be a good tease for some of the next episodes coming up. What are those red flags? How do we move past the red flags? What have you learned over this long period of time? And, what is the value of that for, like I said, all stakeholders, whether you're a consultant, whether you're a limited partner in it, whether, you're the bank in it. So, I think we can touch on all those things just because the breadth of your experience. There's a lot of ways to educate, our viewers as we kind of keep going here.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I do probably have some specialties that I'm pretty well known for, particularly coastal and historic properties, investment assets, and those types of things, which can be completely different and incredibly intense and very difficult. And there's basically an epic minefield that you need to get your way through. That's all fine. But being able to go and transition yourself as a fund manager and understand the intricacies, what I call the conflicts that exist in any particular asset that you're looking at to acquire. Conflicts are not a problem. They freak a lot of people out, but it's only because they're misunderstood. Conflicts are opportunity to us. So and to your point of like, we can break this down in different ways, but from doing industrial conversions, adaptive reuse, multifamily, doing ground up, doing mixed use commercial, doing industrial manufacture, actual making things, actually industrial manufacture, entertainment production, recording studios, sound stages, retail, restaurant, hospitality, hotels, coastal, hillside, and historic. I think that covers our diversity of experience is our advantage. And I think, and I've been very fortunate, very blessed to take advantage of those things and see those and now bring those to my investors and the people that I work with now.
Well, we'll continue to take dives into all that. And that breadth of experience obviously is impressive. Where I know that one of the things that you're known for because this expertise is so deep. I mean, you've done expert witnesses and all these sadly litigation things that pop up. And I know one of the things about your pioneering deep reposition method, your approach to adaptive reuse, the acquisition targeting system, the vertical platform that you develop is all to eliminate those things, mitigate all that out of a deal. And we'll
Yes,
talk more
absolutely.
about that as we continue the show.
Yeah, absolutely. The vertically integrated platform that we handle everything from development to architecture to acquisition to disposition to investment to everything is we're able to remove problems. We work with the same teams. We finish each other's sentences. We're very good at it. It's very difficult because most people, really the only path to do that to rely. So we're not relying on outsourced information, which is usually wrong. Our information comes from in-house. Our pipeline comes from in-house sources. Our acquisition comes from in-house sources. Yes, we do occasionally get some outside, information of what's listed out there. And of course, like anywhere, but we break it down and we source our own deals. That is very unique, and it requires the only way into it is to go down the path that I went through. It's a 30-year career, 3 decades in commercial real estate, solving a myriad of different problems at different stages of your life at different levels. And so that you can begin to see that conflict in real estate is opportunity. And it's just that simple. As long as you have the confidence and the knowledge, and you can tell ultimately if somebody else has the knowledge and how they explain a particular deal or problem to you, whether or not you can rely on them.
Yep. Very good. So, I love the origin story. It really helps establish trust with, anybody that you're coming in contact with when, it's hard to tell the story about yourself, but gosh, this has been awesome. I know the viewers are going to like it, and we're going to look forward to taking a deeper dive into some of the nuts and bolts, some of the what we call deals of the week, some of the deal doctor scenarios, and really make this educational for everybody that gets a chance to plug into the real rant. So with that, I think we'll wrap.
All right.
Appreciate
Sounds
you.
good. Yeah, no, nice to be here. I think I look forward to doing these types of things, where we like to break it down. I'm, excited about our model, and I'm excited about the targeting system that we created. So I'm happy to talk about it.
Awesome. Appreciate you, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Yep. Bye, everyone.